10 years ago, I met Julia Ramirez during freshman orientation at the University of Minnesota. She was the girl everyone noticed but no one dared approach, classic beauty, quick wit, the kind of person who seemed to float through a room like her feet never quite touched the ground. I was the opposite, grounded, maybe even stubbornly so. I studied finance, had a 5-year plan before I even unpacked my dorm room. Claire was undecided, both academically and spiritually. That only made her more magnetic. We dated for 3 years, and by the time I proposed after graduation in a windswept Duluth overlook, she said yes with tears in her eyes. Everyone loved her. My mother called her sunshine. My brother said she brought color into our grayscale family. And for a while, I believed that. We ran a small business together, a design and print shop in a revitalized part of St. Paul. The plan had been to open a second location by 2026. We didn't have kids yet, though we talked about it constantly. After the pandemic, we said. Once things settled. Once the world stopped burning. Except it didn't settle. 4 months ago, something began to shift. Subtly at first, like a wall picture slowly tilting on its nail until one day you realize it's hanging nearly sideways. She stopped texting back promptly. Her smiles didn't reach her eyes. Her excuses multiplied, late-night design revisions, last-minute client meetings, the kind of stuff that didn't add up but couldn't be disproven. I tried to brush it off. Maybe she was stressed. The business had seen better months, and her anxiety tended to manifest in withdrawal. But a part of me, a part one had ignored for too long, started whispering that something was off. Then came the cancelled dinner plans, the turned-away kisses, the subtle shift in body language that screamed, "Don't touch me." It wasn't just distance, it was rejection. And rejection, after 10 years of partnership, feels like standing alone in a storm without an umbrella. I snooped. Not proud of it. Her phone? Clean. Her laptop? Password protected. I even drove past the shop on nights she said she was working late. The lights were on. Her car was there. But once, just once, I saw another car parked out front. It belonged to Eric Liu. Eric was a mutual friend, the kind of guy who showed up to every barbecue, helped move furniture, and made terrible puns that somehow made Claire laugh until she cried. I never worried about Eric. Why would I? He was married. Older. A little pudgy around the edges. Completely unthreatening. Right? The doubt that lived in my stomach grew teeth. So I hired a PI. I didn't want to. It felt like hiring someone to confirm the worst part of your imagination. But I couldn't live in that limbo anymore. 1 week later, I had the proof. Photographs. Time-stamped. Hotel receipts. A damning paper trail and a handful of grainy but unmistakable shots of my wife with a man who was supposed to be a friend. They met 4 times in 6 weeks. Each rendezvous carefully spaced out like they were plotting a murder. And in a way, they were. They were murdering my marriage. I didn't confront her immediately. I let it sit like acid in my gut for 2 days. Then, one night after she came home late again, I sat her down. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't rise. I showed her the photos. She went pale. Then red. Then collapsed into sobs. It was a mistake, she said. It wasn't serious. She begged, pleaded, the full theatrical performance, face buried in hands, shaking shoulders, mascara streaked like she was auditioning for remorse. I didn't say much. Just asked for a timeline. She gave it. 1.5 months. 4 encounters. All physical, she admitted. But she emphasized that most of their time was spent talking, laughing, just being friends. You were using another phone, I said. She nodded. I didn't sleep that night. Just watched her cry on the living room floor until she finally wore herself out. The next morning, I told her to leave. She packed a small bag and went to her parents. Then the text messages started. Every hour. I love you. I messed up. Please let me fix this. I ignored her for 2 days. Then, finally, I sent one message. We're getting a divorce. And that's when the storm truly hit. The day after I told Julia it was over, my phone turned into a battlefield. Her messages went from apologetic to desperate. I didn't answer her calls. My voicemail was filled with sobs that made my stomach churn. Then people from her circle started calling, her sister, friends, even her father, the man who once told me I was the best thing that ever happened to her, begging me not to throw away 10 years. 10 years? It took 10 minutes to ruin everything. Then the post appeared. A long public confession on Facebook. These were her words, not mine. I betrayed the love of my life. I made a terrible mistake and I pay for it every day. Please don't judge him for leaving. Judge me. I deserve it. The comments poured in. Hearts. Prayers. Encouragement. People called her brave for her honesty. Brave? The word hung around me like the smell of burnt toast, bitter, slightly funny, and somehow offensive. Brave would have been not to do it at all. Everyone said she was remorseful. But here's the thing about remorse, it doesn't fix what you've broken. It doesn't bring back that moment when I saw the photo of my wife in the parking lot of a cheap motel, pressed up against another man as if she'd forgotten gravity existed. But there was one moment, one memory, that wouldn't let me rest. And that made it even harder. It was 3 years ago. Julia got food poisoning at a Thai restaurant that we both promised never to mention again. She was sick for hours. And I didn't sleep all night. I remember how she looked at me around 3 in the morning, pale, her hair stuck to her cheek, whispering, "Thank you for being the kind of man I can fall apart with." Now I wondered if she meant temporarily. I still had the wedding ring. I hadn't taken it off yet. I kept telling myself I would, but without it, my finger felt naked. Like a scar from a wound that couldn't decide whether to heal or reopen. I sit in my room and think about it all and realize that I didn't have the courage to tell her that in my mind I was measuring the area of her lies, which at that time was about the size of a warehouse built by drunk builders without blueprints. At least that's how I cheer myself up to still tolerate her and not block her on all social networks and in my life. I didn't know healing could be so painful. I imagined anger, maybe revenge. But instead, I felt exhausted, a deep fatigue that enveloped me like wet clothes. I stopped crying. I stopped screaming. Now I just sat. Quiet. Gloomy. But silence does not mean peace. Julia's campaign for vindication was in full swing. Handwritten letters. Emails at 2 a.m. voice messages so shaky that I thought she might faint mid-sentence. One day, she sent me a photo album called Our Firsts. Inside were photos of our first apartment, our first trip, our first snow day. I stared at them for a long time, then hid the album behind boxes of cereal, as if it were some kind of cursed museum relic. Her mother called. "You're a good man, Ryan. Don't forget that." I didn't feel like that. I felt like a fool with easy target written on my forehead. Then came the suggestion, family therapy. She wanted to go. She insisted it could help. She even offered to go alone if I wouldn't go with her. And for a moment, just a moment, I thought, maybe. Maybe we'll fight for this. Maybe we'll get through this. Then I remembered the hotel receipt. The time it was made. Her smile in the photo, relaxed and carefree in the company of another person. It wasn't the pain that stopped me from agreeing. It was clarity. But I still wanted answers. I agreed to meet her at a cafe off Highway 36. Neutral territory. She looked thinner. Paler. As if grief had been her diet and shame her workout plan. When she spoke, her voice trembled like an old tree. "I was lonely. You were always working." It hit me like a freight train. Not because it wasn't true. Because it was the truth, turned into a weapon. "I was building our future," I said. "And you were destroying it." She cried. Of course she cried. And part of me wanted to comfort her. That old instinct never dies. But I held back. Because sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to let the person you loved burn in the fire they started. She asked me, "Do you still love me?" And I replied, "I don't know who you are." The waitress came over and asked if we needed anything. I said, "Just the check." It turns out that ending a relationship costs $14.95, including tip. It's strange how grief gives way to absurdity. 2 days after dinner, I had finally gotten used to what I thought would be a long, gray period of loneliness. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. I opened it and saw a woman with her arms loaded with food containers and a suitcase that looked like it had been through a small war. "Surprise!" she exclaimed. It was Aunt Lydia. Julia's aunt. Not mine. I had forgotten she even existed, somewhere between the second Thanksgiving and the third New Year's toast. A retired high school librarian. A lover of conspiracy theories, ginger tea, and audiobooks about murders, which she listened to at a volume usually reserved for outdoor sporting events. "I heard you and Ryan are going through a rough patch," she said as she walked past me into the living room. "So I thought, why not come over? Maybe I can help you guys work things out. Plus, I'm allergic to cats, so I had to leave my neighbor." Long story. It wasn't a long story. She told me everything. Within an hour, my house smelled like patchouli and canned lentils. She put her suitcase in the guest room and her feet up on my couch. "You know, Ryan, when my third marriage was ending, I joined a support group where they played the ukulele. It changed my life. I prefer to grieve quietly," I muttered. "Tragic," she said, nodding her head like a disappointed psychotherapist. She spent the next day doing what she called energy cleansing. This involved humming in every room while holding a spoon and tapping on the furniture with a rolled-up TV guide. When I asked why, she replied, "Your house is hiding a broken heart. You have to destroy the sadness with sound waves. It's science." I didn't dare tell her that she had just knocked over my router. And yet, oddly enough, it worked. Not the rituals, the absurdity. Because the moment I started laughing at Aunt Lydia as she recounted her past divorces as if they were war crimes she had barely escaped, something inside me relaxed. "You know," she said that evening as we drank her homemade fermented cranberry tea, which, by the way, tastes like bitterness poured through battery acid, "Julia isn't the villain in every version of this story. And you're not a saint in all of yours. But pain isn't a pie, it doesn't get smaller if someone else has more of it." I didn't respond. I just sat there, staring at the tea as if it contained a survival plan for betrayal. Then she added, "You have a right to be angry. But don't stay there. Anger is a tent. It's not a house." That night, for the first time in weeks, I went to bed without seeing hotel bills in my dreams or hearing the echo of "I'm sorry." In the morning, Lydia was gone. She didn't say goodbye. She just left a note on the fridge. "I've gone to yoga. If I die there, remember me with love, Aunt L." It turns out that sometimes the universe doesn't send angels. It sends retired librarians with garlic breath and unwanted advice about ukuleles. And, strangely enough, sometimes that's even better. A week passed after Aunt Lydia's spiritual exorcism, and silence returned, this time even quieter. Not quite peaceful. More like the eye of a hurricane, the calm before the next gust of wind. Then I got a message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. No greeting. Just a photo. Juliet and Eric. Together. Again. They were standing in front of something that looked like a wine bar in Stillwater. She was smiling. He was leaning toward her, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, as if they were rehearsing a scene from a Hallmark movie. At first, I didn't feel angry. I felt sick. There was a dull burning sensation in my throat. It turns out that betrayal has several levels. It's not just what someone does, it's what they continue to do after they promise to stop. I called the detective again. He hadn't heard from me in weeks. "Are you sure?" he asked. "No," I replied. "But I'm sure I don't want to be a character in someone else's story." 2 days later, he handed me everything. A second phone. Disposable. New places. New lies. It didn't stop. Not completely. It just got quieter. The worst part was that he restored Julia's messages to Eric. "I miss you more than I should. I don't know who I am without you. I still dream about that weekend." Weekend. Not night. Not a mistake. I printed them out. Don't ask me why, maybe because betrayal seems more real when it's printed in black and white. Like it has mass. Wait. A voice. I looked at those pages the way you look at an X-ray of a broken rib cage, detached, almost morbidly curious about the mechanism of the damage. That night, I sat on the porch with a six-pack of the worst beer in the world and my neighbor Jeff, who hardly ever talks unless the twins are playing. I gave him a bottle and told him everything. He didn't say much. Just nodded. And then finally, have you ever changed the oil in your car? I blinked. Excuse me? He tapped the bottle. The first time you do it, you make a mess. You spill oil everywhere. You strip the bolts. You burn yourself. But the second time? You know where the pitfalls are. You don't make the same mistakes twice. Was he talking about cars or pain? Maybe both. Either way, it struck me. The next morning, I drove to Julia's parents' house. She wasn't expecting me. Her father opened the door, his jaw clenched. She's not here. I know, I said. I'm not here for her. I'm here to end this. He let me in. We sat down at the kitchen table. I pushed the photos and printouts across the tabletop. His face crumpled. He didn't cry, but I could see something breaking inside him. You deserve better, he said quietly. I don't want your apologies, I replied. I want you to stop calling me. Stop asking me to save what she burned twice. He nodded. And in that moment, we understood each other, two men watching a loved one turn into someone else. I left without saying goodbye. That night, Julia texted me. I made a mistake. I replied, you made a choice. Then I turned off my phone and went to bed. This time, I slept like a man who knows where the oil filter is. There is something grotesquely beautiful about a clean break. It's clarity. It's finality. But this? This was a slow dissolution. Drop by drop of pain. Julia didn't respond to my last message, at least, not right away. But the next morning, her reply came back like a stone skipping across a black lake, short, quick, and sinking fast. You don't understand what he gave me. That phrase spun around in my head like a broken record. It wasn't even the worst thing she said. The worst part was the simplicity of those words. What he gave her. It was as if I had offered her leftovers, and Eric came in with a 5-course menu of confirmation and escape. I closed the message, put my phone on the table, and went to the garage. I didn't need answers anymore. I needed a distraction. So I fixed the door hinges that had been squeaking for a year. Finally, I replaced the oil filter in the Civic. I reorganized the toolbox again. Anything to keep from looking at the door, waiting for the next apology wrapped in a knife. But when trust is broken, it's not just between two people. It reverberates. It spreads in waves through every corner of your life. At the store, I began to suspect everyone. When our intern smiled too broadly, I wondered what secrets she was hiding. When our supplier delayed an order, I immediately suspected foul play. The poison spread. Even my mother noticed. You've become quieter, she said at dinner. I nodded. Because I am. And then I fell asleep. I was at our wedding again. Julia was walking toward me in a white dress, her eyes full of joy, but halfway to the altar, she stopped. She turned around. And walked away. No drama. No apologies. She just walked away. I woke up with a heavy heart and trembling hands. Sadness is a strange thing. It's not always loud. Sometimes it just sits in your chest like wet cement. A week later, she showed up. No phone call. No warning. She just knocked, and there she was, standing on my porch in the jacket I bought her for our 3rd anniversary. I thought you didn't come to say goodbye, I said. I didn't come to say goodbye, she replied. I came to find out the last truth. I let her in. Against all common sense. Against the advice of everyone who loved me. She sat down on the couch. The same couch where we watched entire seasons of TV shows in one weekend. The same couch where she once cried when we lost her grandmother. The same couch that I now associated with betrayal and burnt popcorn. I wanted to feel loved, she said. Eric made me feel that way. But that doesn't excuse what I did to you. And I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know that it was never because I stopped loving you. I sat across from her, slowly nodding my head. That's strange, I said. You say you never stopped loving me. But love, real love, doesn't come with conditions or reservations. It just appears. And it stays. Tears welled up in her eyes. But I didn't move to comfort her. Not this time. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know, I said. But an apology won't put the pieces back together. And for the first time, she didn't argue. She left quietly. She closed the door carefully, as if she finally understood what it really meant to break up. And I stood in the hallway of the house we had built together and realized that it was no longer our home. It was my home. The call came on Tuesday. My father had had a heart attack. Sudden. Severe. He was trimming the hedge when he suddenly collapsed. My mother found him lying face down in the garden, scissors in his hands, the air filled with the scent of freshly cut rosemary. When I arrived at the hospital, the lights in the hallway hummed like restless breathing. My mother sat hunched over a plastic chair, a trembling cup in her hands. She looked up when I approached, and for the first time in my life, I saw her looking so fragile. He asked about you, she said. I entered the intensive care unit. The machines beeped in a slow rhythm. My father, who once lifted an entire sofa 3 stories to prove his point, lay under a blanket. A pale blue shadow of the man who taught me to drive and not to cry at movies, even though he always cried himself. Hello, son, he said in a hoarse voice. I pulled up a chair. I didn't think you'd beat me to it, he smiled. You always said I was slow. He barely smiled. Are you okay? I asked. No, he replied. But you can be. He reached for my hand. It was weaker than I remembered. Don't let bitterness win, son. It's tempting. It feels like armor. But it's just rust. It will eat away at everything inside you. I wanted to say something profound. But I just squeezed his hand. He made it through the night. Barely. The next day, I was at home. In my house. Alone. Until Julia arrived. I opened the door, too tired to pretend to be surprised. Your mother called me, she said quietly. She told me about your father. I stepped aside. She entered as if she remembered every creak in the floor. We sat in the living room, 2 ghosts wandering the same ruins. I know I shouldn't be here, she said. But I couldn't not come. Not because of that. Then something inside me snapped. Not anger. Not forgiveness. Just a deep, painful exhaustion that had nowhere to go. I don't know who we are now, I said. She nodded. Me neither. But I still care about you. That hasn't changed. There was silence. Heavy, but not hostile. Then she stood up. She walked over to the bookcase and took out one of our old photo albums. Sitting down on the rug, she crossed her legs the way she used to when we first moved in. She slowly flipped through the pages. We didn't talk. We just looked at our younger selves laughing, posing, pretending that everything would be okay. I used to look at this and feel proud, she said. Now I look at it and feel small. Those weren't words meant to win me back. They were just honesty. And that honesty did something I didn't expect. I cried. At first, the tears flowed quietly. Then faster. And soon I was sobbing in the same room where I had once promised her eternal love. She reached out to me, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't push her away. After that, we didn't talk. We just sat there in silence. 2 people who loved each other. Who had hurt each other. And who, perhaps, hadn't finished writing this story yet. She didn't stay that night. But when she closed the door, it didn't feel like goodbye. It felt like a comma. It happened without fanfare or warning. Just a late call on my cell phone, one of those messages that cut through the evening like a scalpel. It was Eric. No introductions. Just one sentence. If you want to know the whole truth, meet me tonight. Once. No lies. The address was a bar I knew well, the Dive on the east side of town with flickering lights and an unspoken code of silence. The kind of place you go to disappear. I didn't answer. I just got in the car. The bar was half empty. He was already there, sitting in the back corner, sipping something dark and expensive. When he saw me, he didn't smile. No gloating. Just a nod, like a man who finally realized the price of his game. You came, he said. I didn't sit down. Say what you have to say. He took a sip of his drink. Julia thinks I manipulated her. And you didn't? Eric didn't flinch. At first, yes. But then something happened. She wasn't like the others. I laughed, short, hollow. Of course she wasn't. That's a standard line, isn't it? No, he said. She changed me. And then, right in front of me, the man who had turned my life upside down began to cry. I was a coward. I lied to Elena. I hurt people. But I loved your wife. Not like you did, maybe not enough for it to last, but it was real love. At least for me. He slid a flash drive across the table. Messages. Calls. I saved them. Not because I was proud, but because I didn't want to forget what it was like to be loved. I didn't take the flash drive. I just stared at it. Why now? I asked. Why did you decide to confess? Eric wiped his face. Because I'm dying. The words hit me like a knife. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I've got 6 months to live. Suddenly, the man I hated became someone else. Not a villain. Not even a rival. Just a human being, flawed, broken, and full of regret. I wanted you to know, he said. I wanted someone to know that I wasn't just a liar. Not completely. I left without taking the flash drive. The next day, I told Julia everything. We were in the park. She sat on a bench, hugging herself as if preparing for bad news. He's dying, I said. Her face froze. Not from shock, but from resignation. Did he tell you everything? He gave me the flash drive. I didn't take it. She stared ahead, her eyes glassy. I loved him, you know. I know. And I loved you too. I nodded. There was a long silence. Then she said, if things had been different, if there had been no betrayal, no lies, do you think we would have stayed together? I didn't answer right away. Then, finally. No. Because something would have broken anyway. We just hadn't seen it yet. She reached out her hand to mine. I let her take it. For a moment. Then I stood up. Goodbye, Julia. This time she didn't follow me. Some stories don't end with fireworks. They end with whispers and doors that don't close all the way. The week after that last goodbye, I felt like I was walking around a house that no longer belonged to me, even though technically it did. I still brushed my teeth on autopilot, still out of habit set the coffee maker for 2 cups. Grief clung to the curtains, hid in the floor. It didn't scream. It hummed. I always believed that people don't see their lives clearly until they fall apart. Clarity is cruel. It waits until you fall to the floor, picking up the pieces, and only then does it hand you the mirror. It was in one of those moments in front of the mirror that I did something I hadn't done since before the betrayal. I opened my old diary. The first page, a note I wrote to myself when I was 24. Love is being there. Even when you're tired. Even when you're afraid. Especially then. I forgot about that version of myself. About a man who believed that consistency was a form of poetry. Somewhere along the way, I traded presence for productivity. I began to measure my worth by results rather than openness. And no, I don't excuse her betrayal. But I take responsibility for holding on too tightly and for letting go. Here's the truth I never wanted to admit. I built a life with Julia like a house from a blueprint. Efficient. Safe. Symmetrical. But I forgot to leave room for chaos, for change, for her wildness. I loved the version of her that fit my plan. And when she started to drift away, I tightened the screws instead of asking her why the wind was pulling her away. Maybe I was afraid she would say something I couldn't fix. Now I see Rainer Maria Rilke's quote differently. The only journey is the journey within. I thought I was traveling with Julia. But I hadn't even begun my own journey. I didn't realize how much I was using her to confirm who I thought I was supposed to be: a faithful husband, a stable partner, a reliable provider. But never vulnerable. Never human. And when cracks appeared, I was too proud to look at them up close. So I painted over them. Now, standing here with the paint peeling away, I see myself more clearly than I ever wanted to. Skeletons in the closet? Yes, I have a few. I used silence as a weapon when I didn't want to argue. I thought it was safer to hide my love than to give it away and be rejected. I let resentment simmer quietly instead of clearing the air. You don't have to cheat to betray someone. Sometimes it's enough to just not be there when they need you. That doesn't excuse her choice. But it helps me understand the terrain we were both lost in. Eric's diagnosis? It hit me hard. Not because I felt sorry for him, but because it made me realize my own mortality. That any day, this whole story, the broken heart, the silence, the anger, could be the last chapter. And is that how I wanted to end up? Not bitter. Not hardened by what had been done to me. I want peace. I want everything that comes next to be as light as air, not as heavy as a rock. So I did something crazy. I forgave her. Not because she deserved it, but because I didn't want to carry her mistake anymore. I understand that forgiveness is not a gift to another person. It's a ticket you give yourself to prove that you are finally free. And with that freedom, I am ready for the next page. I never imagined that healing could be quiet. No fanfare. No grand gesture. Just silence. And in that silence, something new began. Peace. Not the kind that feels like victory, but the kind that comes when you finally stopped bleeding. I moved out of the house. Packed the memories into boxes. Left behind the couch, the shared toothbrush holder, the photo albums. I took only what was mine, and even then, only what I needed. You don't realize how much weight you've carried until you put it down. The new apartment is small, humble. There's a chip in the bathroom tile and the walls are too thin. But the sunlight hits the floor just right in the mornings, and the silence here feels earned. One Sunday, I walked to the farmer's market. Picked out vegetables. Talked to strangers. Laughed at something dumb. It hit me then, this was the first time in months I'd laughed without looking over my shoulder. There's a quote by C.S. Lewis I've been coming back to. Getting over a painful experience is much like crossing monkey bars. You have to let go at some point in order to move forward. And I did. I let go. Of the betrayal. Of the anger. Of the need to have all the answers. Here's the truth, if you've read this far, you won't always get closure from the people who hurt you. You have to make your own. And it might not come all at once, it might take months or years, but it will come, if you give yourself permission to stop bleeding for people who keep handing you knives. To anyone holding on to someone who's already let go, please hear me, you are not a failure for walking away. Love is not supposed to feel like a war zone. Loyalty is not a leash. You are not obligated to rebuild a home with someone who burned it to the ground and called it an accident. So here's my wish for you. That you choose peace over performance. That you learn to listen to the quiet parts of yourself, the ones that whisper instead of scream. That you forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you do. And above all, that you remember this. You can lose someone, and still find yourself. You can fall apart, and still rise. You can love again when you're ready. And when you do, it will be honest. Whole. Free of shadows. Not a sequel. A new story. And this time, you get to write it.